France's Emmanuel Macron and European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen arrive in Beijing today to meet President Xi Jinping. President Macron's trip to China is his first since 2019, while Ms. von der Leyen is on her first official visit. Now, that trip comes amid heightened geopolitical tensions. The European Commission chief last week accused China of pursuing a systemic change of the international order with Beijing at its center. For more insights, we're joined live by Jean-Pierre Cabeston, Emeritus Professor at the Department of Government and International Studies from the Faculty of Social Sciences at Hong Kong Baptist University, and he joins us from Hong Kong. Professor, Joe Biden just needing to get that word in with Macron before the trip on Tuesday. The American pressure on its allies or its European allies is relentless. So how do you see Macron balancing these expectations, given he says he wants strategic autonomy for Europe when trying to build better ties with China?
I think there are two things we can say here. The first thing is Macron has been very cautious since first calling President Biden to inform him about his visit to Beijing and his attempt to have China helping the Europeans, but also the West, finding a solution on the war in Ukraine. And he got the green light from President Biden. Now, whether he's going to succeed, it's another matter. The other thing is that he's going to China, as you know, with Ursula von der Leyen, the president of the EU Commission. So he's also been cautious to sort of not only liaise, but also coordinate his China policy with the European Union China policy. So now I think that the word strategic autonomy is not less mentioned today. It refers more to economic interest than strategic interest, because clearly with the war in Ukraine, the strategic interests of the European Union and the United States are very much aligned and are sort of very much highlighted by the growing role of NATO in the security of Europe.
Professor Ursula von der Leyen, on the other hand, has a bit more of a confrontational approach when it comes to Beijing. She likes to use the term de-risk. Some reports are saying some EU member states consider her too closely aligned with the Biden administration as well. So how are she and Macron expected to put on this unified front on this trip?
Well, it's going to be interesting how they can play their partition. As you pointed out, I think they're not exactly on the same wavelengths, but I mean, at the same time, they're going together. They're going to speak with the one voice about the Ukraine issue and the Russian invasion of Ukraine and the willingness of the European Union to see the Russian troops leaving altogether the Ukrainian territory in order to, achieve some kind of peace in that part of Europe. Is very important. I think it's a view which is shared both by France and by the European Union. I think I'm sure you've mentioned, you've noticed that Ursula von der Leyen is from Germany, and it's very important for the European and the German to be aligned on this issue. So I think there is a willingness to cooperate with China. But at the same time, both in France and the rest of Europe, there is a willingness to reduce the European Union economic dependence upon China in order to mitigate any risks, in particular in case of a war in the Taiwan Strait or a crisis there. That will be actually the European Union and France will be very vulnerable if they will keep that level of dependence upon China.
Okay, Professor, let's look a bit more closely at Ukraine. Xi Jinping remains firm about his no-limits friendship with Putin. Europeans want China to do more to try to end the war in Ukraine. And Spain's Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez didn't manage to move the needle on this issue last week. So when it comes to Macron, do you expect Mr. Xi to give some ground on the issue?
I'm not expecting much, actually. Personally, I'm very skeptical about the ability of Macron and von der Leyen to sort of change China's view on the war. China and Russia are very much aligned against NATO, which is pointed out as a major culprit of the war, while actually it's a war of invasion provoked by Russia. So it's very hard to move China on that issue. And China and Russia, as you know, share a lot of strategic but also economic interests. China has become one of the major recipients of Russian oil and natural gas. So China's doubled its trade with Russia. And clearly there is an intention to keep this strategic partnership with Russia very strong. So in that context, I don't think that Xi Jinping is going to put much pressure on Russia. The 12-point statement or position paper issued by China earlier this year is not really a peace plan. It's just a set of principles which is very hard to carry out or to implement, because on the one hand it claims that it wants to protect and respect Ukraine's national sovereignty and territorial integrity. At the same time, it includes parts which are very much anti-NATO and anti-West. So I don't know how can China square the circle on this issue.
And Professor von der Leyen also recently said how China continues to interact with Putin's war will be a determining factor for EU-China relations going forward. But reality is the EU can't really afford to decouple itself from Beijing, especially economically. What do you think?
Yes, I think the word decouple is not a word which is used by Europeans. I think it's a kind of taboo in Europe. And as I said earlier, the intention is to reduce European Union's economic dependence upon China. So it's not the end of business, but I think business with China will become more selective. I think Europe has already, a number of European nations have already put in place some filters to better screen Chinese investments in Europe and avoid any free transfer of technology to China. And I think there's also more awareness to prevent transfer of military and dual technologies to China in the current context. And it's very hard for the European Union and European nations and NATO members in particular to not align with the Biden administration in terms of technology transfer to China, and and anything which would allow China to empower its military and become even more threat to its neighbors.
Professor, that is all the time we have. Thank you very much for joining us. That was Jean-Pierre Cabestan, Emeritus Professor at the Department of Government and International Studies from the Faculty of Social Sciences at Hong Kong Baptist University.